The wind swept across the plains as he worked the ranch, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the golden fields. He had grown used to solitude over the years, the steady rhythm of the cattle, the creak of the fence gates, and the distant calls of hawks circling overhead. Yet even in familiar comfort of his routine, there were moments when memories of the past would creep in, unbidden and bittersweet. He often thought about the nights when storms tore across the prairie, howling like restless spirits, and how he had once found a frightened little girl huddled beneath the sparse trees, trembling and drenched by the rain. It had been years ago, during one of those relentless storms. He had been riding alone, the rain blinding him as it fell in torrents, when a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be an animal, but as he approached, the truth became clear. She was human, no older than 13, shivering violently and barely conscious with cold. The bandits who pursued her had vanished into the storm, leaving her vulnerable and terrified. Without hesitation, he swung down from his horse and lifted her into his arms. She had whimpered softly, pressing her small body against his chest, as if sensing that she was finally safe. That night, by the warmth of a hastily built fire, he learned fragments of her story. She had been separated from her family during a raid, forced to flee into the wilderness alone. Her eyes, wide with fear, had met his as she whispered tales of loss and danger, and something inside him had shifted. There was no hesitation, no thought for his own safety, only a fierce determination to protect her. He had given her food, dry blankets, and a place by the fire, speaking softly, trying to ease the trembling that racked her small frame. She had clung to him, and though she said little, he had felt a connection, fragile but undeniable, that he could never forget. Years passed. The girl had disappeared from his life as abruptly as she had appeared. Life on the ranch became his entire world. The cattle, the horses, the endless stretch of land that demanded every ounce of his energy. He buried memories of that stormy night deep in his heart, pretending they were nothing more than fleeting moment of charity and luck. Yet, every now and then, when the wind carried certain scents or when the rain fell hard enough to remind him of that night, he would feel her presence in his mind, as if the past were reaching out to him. Then, one morning, a letter arrived, carried by a rider from a neighboring town. The handwriting was delicate and careful, looping with an elegance that made his pulse quicken. He opened it, unsure what he would find, and as he read the words, a mixture of disbelief and hope surged through him. "I will be coming to find you. Do not forget me. Cowboy, I have not forgotten you." He read the lines over and over, each time feeling a strange tug in his chest. Could it be her? Could the little girl he had saved so many years ago have survived all those dangers and now seek him out? Days passed, and his mind refused to rest. He wondered who she'd become, how the years had shaped her, and why fate had chosen to bring her back now. The thought of seeing her again filled him with anticipation and unease in equal measure. He remembered the trust in her eyes, the quiet gratitude that touched something deep inside him, and he felt a stirring he had long denied, something beyond mere duty or nostalgia. When she finally arrived, the sight took his breath away. She was no longer the frightened child he had rescued. She had grown into a woman, tall and strong, her posture proud and her gaze steady. The golden light of sunset framed her figure, and he could see immediately that she had survived life's trials with grace and courage. Her hair, dark and free-flowing, framed a face that had known hardship but refused to be defined by it. She smiled, and in that smile he saw a recognition, longing, and a quiet determination that set his heart racing. I can't believe it's really you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. It had been years since he had allowed himself to speak of her, yet now the words came unbidden, raw, and full of feeling. "You remembered," she said softly, stepping closer, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that left him momentarily breathless. "I knew you would." They spent the evening recounting the years that had passed. She told him of the struggles she had faced, how she had learned to survive on her own, the people she had trusted and lost, and the moments she had feared he might have forgotten her. Each story she shared revealed a strength and resilience he could hardly have imagined in the little girl he once knew. Yet beneath her courage, he sensed the lingering pain of those years, a silent shadow that she had carried alone. As the stars emerged, painting the night sky with countless pinpricks of light. He realized just how deeply he had missed her, how much the memory of her had haunted him even as he tried to bury it. And yet, as he watched her laugh softly at a story from her past, he also felt hope, a sense that maybe after all this time, they had been given a second chance. He asked her why she had returned, and her answer was simple yet profound. "Because you saved me once," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "And now, I want to spend my life with you. I've waited years, Cowboy, years to tell you that." The word struck him with a force he hadn't expected. The thought of love, once inconceivable, now seemed real, tangible, and terrifying in its intensity. He had spent years guarding his heart, thinking himself immune to attachments he could not afford. And yet here she stood, offering him a gift he had never dared imagine. Even as joy swelled within him, he could not ignore the challenges that awaited. Their love, raw and undeniable, existed in a world that was not always kind to outsiders, especially a woman from her background. Prejudices lingered like shadows in the small towns beyond his ranch, and whispers of distrust could reach even the quietest corners of the prairie. Could they survive the scrutiny of those who would never understand? Could a bond forged in fear and desperation so many years ago withstand the trials of society and time? Despite the doubts, he felt something unwavering in his chest, a determination to protect her, to cherish her, and to face whatever obstacles might arise. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, he realized at this moment this reunion was more than fate. It was a chance to embrace a love that had waited patiently, hidden in the folds of memory and time. Her presence was magnetic, her courage infectious, and as they sat together, sharing stories and quiet laughter, he understood that the years of separation had not weakened the connection between them. They had only strengthened it. And though the world beyond the ranch might not welcome their union, within the safety of these plains, they had found a sanctuary, a place where the past and present could coexist and where the seeds of love could finally take root. By the time the fire had dwindled to glowing embers, neither of them wanted to speak of leaving. The silence was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding and promises yet to be made. He realized that saving her all those years ago had been the beginning of a story neither of them could have foreseen, a story that now continued, richer and deeper than either had dared to hope. As the night settled over the prairie, he felt a quiet certainty settle within him. She had returned not just a memory of what he had done for her, but because of the bond they had shared, the trust that had never faltered, and the love that had quietly grown, unseen but unshakable. And though the road ahead would not be without challenges, he knew that together they could face anything. The following days on the ranch were unlike any he had ever experienced. She moved among the fields and stables with ease, yet every action carried the grace and determination of someone who had survived far more than her years should have allowed. She fed the horses, helped mend fences, and even rode alongside him as he checked the cattle. Their conversations flowed easily, filled with laughter, gentle teasing, and the occasional reflective silence when the weight of the past pressed against them. Yet, beneath the comfort of companionship, both of them knew that the world outside the ranch could be less forgiving. News of her return spread quickly through the nearby towns and settlements. Rumors carried on the wind reached their ears, whispers of distrust and suspicion. Some villagers still held on to the old prejudices, convinced that an Apache girl, now a woman, could never belong in their midst, especially with a cowboy who had long been respected for his steadiness and honor. He had expected some resistance, but seeing the cold stares and hearing the hushed murmurs still stung in a way he hadn't anticipated. He clenched his fists at times, wanting to confront them, but he reminded himself that anger would not protect her. What was required was patience, courage, and the quiet strength that had carried him through storms before. She noticed the tension too, though she never let it dampen her spirit. "We'll face them together," she said one evening as they stood on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. "I've faced worse. I'm not afraid anymore, not with you." Her hand found his, and the simple gesture grounded him, reminding him why he had chosen to embrace this moment instead of retreating into caution. Together, they decided to show the townspeople who she truly was, not just as an outsider, but as a person of courage, intelligence, and integrity. She volunteered to help with tasks that benefited the community, from aiding with the harvest to caring for sick children in need of attention. At first, People were hesitant, their old fears forming invisible walls. But as days passed, they began to see that her intentions were pure, and her heart was as generous as any born in the town. Slowly, grudging respect replaced suspicion, and admiration even began to flicker in the eyes of those who had once doubted her. Their evenings, however, were reserved for each other. After the day's work was done, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories, hopes, and dreams that had been postponed for too long. She told him about her journey, how she had navigated the treacherous paths between towns, surviving harsh winters and hostile encounters, yet never giving up hope of finding him again. He shared his own stories, of lonely nights and unspoken regrets, of a life that had always felt incomplete without her presence. Each revelation drew them closer, binding them together not just with affection, but with understanding and trust forged through time and shared memories. The first time he touched her hand after that long night of reunion, it felt like electricity running through his veins. Every nerve seemed alive with anticipation. And yet there was a softness, too, a gentle reassurance that their love, once fragile and hidden, could now be nurtured openly. She looked at him with eyes that spoke of gratitude, devotion, and a quiet, unwavering love. And in that gaze, he saw the possibility of a future they could build together, despite any obstacle. But love in a world divided was never simple. One afternoon, as he returned from the far side of the pasture, he found a group of men from the town waiting near the barn. Their expressions were hard, voices edged with suspicion. "You can't just let her stay here," one said, his tone flat but menacing. "She's not one of us. She doesn't belong." His heart ached at the sight, but he remained calm. "She saved herself and came here with respect," he replied firmly. "She belongs wherever she chooses to belong." For a tense moment, silence hung heavy. Then she stepped forward, her chin lifted, eyes unwavering. "I am here because I chose to be," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "I am not here to take anything from anyone. I am here because I love him, and he loves me. That is enough for me." The words, simple yet powerful, silenced the doubters. Slowly, grudgingly, some nodded, recognizing her courage and conviction. Others remained skeptical, but the tide of opinion was turning. The couple knew it would take time for full acceptance, yet that moment marked a turning point. They had faced the first real test together and emerged stronger, bound not just by love, but by mutual respect and shared resilience. As days turned into weeks, the bond between them deepened. Every shared chore, every laugh, every quiet moment in the twilight strengthened the foundation they had been building for years. Their love became a living testament to the power of trust, patience, and unwavering courage. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's fears, and each other's joys, creating a life that, while not free of challenges, was filled with meaning and purpose. One night, under the vast prairie sky, he finally allowed himself to voice the question that had lingered in his heart for so long. The fire flickered between them, casting warm light across their faces. "Will you marry me?" His voice was thick with emotion, unsteady yet filled with hope. He waited, heart pounding, for her answer. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her smile was radiant and unshakable. "Yes," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of years of longing and determination. "I've waited my whole life to say that. I will marry you." In that moment, the past and present converged. The little Apache girl he had once saved was now a woman who had chosen to save him in return. Through love, trust, and courage, the trials they had faced, the distance and time, the fears of the world outside, all only strengthened their bond. They had fought not just for each other, but for the right to embrace their love openly, unafraid of judgment or prejudice. The fire crackled as they embraced, the prairie wind carrying with it the whispers of the past, yet also a promise of the future. They knew challenges would continue to arise, that the world beyond the ranch might not always understand, but they also knew that their love was stronger than any obstacle. It was a love born of trust, tested by hardship, and reaffirmed by choice. They had chosen each other, and that choice would guide them through whatever lay ahead. The night stretched on, peaceful and full of quiet promise. The stars shone overhead, witnesses to a love that had endured time, trials, and fear. And as they sat together, hand in hand, they realized that this story, once a fleeting memory in the heart of Cowboy, had blossomed into something eternal. In a world that often demanded caution and conformity, they had dared to follow their hearts. They had dared to love. As the wind rustled through the grass and the prairies stretched endlessly around them, they understood a truth far greater than either had anticipated. Courage was not only in facing storms or bandits, but in opening one's heart to love after years of fear and solitude. And in that courage, they found not just hope, but a future bright, unshakable, and filled with the promise of shared life, no longer defined by the past, but guided by the love they had fought so hard to claim. The couple remained there for hours, sharing quiet words, gentle laughter, and the comforting silence of a night that belonged entirely to them. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be tested by the world, but strengthened by the resilience and devotion they had nurtured. And in that embrace, they found the greatest victory of all, the freedom to love fully, unapologetically, and without regret.